The escape pod hit the ice with a sound like breaking glass. Inside, Hana pressed her three-fingered hands against the cracked view screen and watched her research vessel explode in the distance. The bright flash painted her crystalline skin with orange light for just a moment, before fading into the darkness of space. She was alone now, completely alone. The pod systems were dying around her. Red lights blinked on the control panel, each one marking another failure. Life support was damaged. The heating system sparked and went silent. The distress beacon flickered weakly, barely strong enough to reach beyond this frozen moon. Hana looked at her hands. They were already turning darker at the edges, the clear crystal-like quality of her skin becoming cloudy. This was the first sign. When her people got too cold, their skin changed color. Then it would crack. Then they would die. The temperature display showed -30 degrees and falling. Her species could not survive below -40. She had perhaps 2 hours, maybe 3 if she was lucky. Outside the pod, she could see nothing but ice and rock. This moon had been a mining colony once, abandoned years ago when the minerals ran out. Now it was just a frozen graveyard of old equipment and empty buildings. The nearest space station was 6 days away. Her beacon would never reach that far. Hana pulled her research tablet from the emergency kit. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to activate the recording function. If someone found her body eventually, at least her work would survive. Research log, final entry. She spoke in her language, watching her breath form crystals in the freezing air. Dr. Hana of the Vithani Science Institute. My vessel was destroyed by solar storm radiation. I have crashed on mining moon Theta 7. There is no possibility of rescue. She paused, feeling the cold creeping deeper into her body. Her 3 hearts were beating slower now, trying to conserve energy. It would not help. Nothing would help. I want my family to know that I was not afraid, she continued. I chose this work because I wanted to see the universe. I wanted to prove that individual contribution matters even in our efficient society. I believe I succeeded in my research. I hope it will benefit our people. The tablet slipped from her fingers. She was so tired. The cold made everything feel heavy and distant. Hana had always known that space exploration was dangerous. The Vithani were a careful people, logical and precise. They calculated every risk before taking action. But sometimes calculations were not enough. Sometimes the universe surprised you with a solar storm that came from nowhere and tore your ship apart. She thought about her home planet with its controlled temperatures and organized cities. She thought about her colleagues who had told her she was foolish to volunteer for deep space research. Maybe they had been right. Maybe efficiency and safety were more important than discovery. The pod's emergency lighting dimmed. Hana leaned back against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes. She could feel her skin cracking now, tiny lines spreading across her arms and face. It did not hurt as much as she expected. The cold was making everything numb. Her translator device chirped softly on her belt. It was still working, still ready to convert her language into dozens of others. What a waste. There was no one here to talk to. Through the cracked view screen, she could see the stars. They looked different from this angle, unfamiliar constellations that she had never studied. One of those distant points of light was her home sun. She would never see it again. Hana's thoughts began to drift. She remembered her childhood, learning about the great Vithani Empire that spanned 40 systems. She remembered her first day at the Science Institute, how proud her family had been. She remembered the excitement when her research proposal was accepted, when she was given her own small vessel to explore distant moons and catalog mineral compositions. Such simple work, really, measuring rocks and ice. But she had loved it. Every discovery, no matter how small, had felt like a victory. Now those discoveries would die with her. The temperature gauge showed -38 degrees. Her vision was getting blurry. Her 3 hearts were beating so slowly now that she could count the seconds between each pulse. This was how it ended, then. Not in some dramatic accident, not in a moment of glory, but simply freezing to death in a broken pod on a forgotten moon. The universe did not care about drama. It did not care about fairness. It simply was. Hana tried to move her fingers one last time. They would not respond. The cold had gone too deep. She could no longer feel her legs. Her thoughts were becoming confused, mixing memories with dreams. She was ready. She had lived a good life, even if it was shorter than she had hoped. She had contributed to her people's knowledge. She had seen wonders that most Vithani would never witness. That would have to be enough. In the silence of the dying pod, Hana heard something. At first, she thought it was just the metal contracting from the cold, or perhaps her own imagination. But no, there it was again, a sound, a rhythmic crunching like footsteps on ice. She tried to open her eyes wider, but her vision was too blurred. The sound was getting closer. Something was outside the pod. Some creature? This moon was supposed to be lifeless. The surveys had shown nothing but ice and rock. The footsteps stopped just outside. Hana heard a new sound now, metal against metal. Someone was trying to open the pod's emergency hatch. That was impossible. There was no one on this moon. She was alone. She had to be alone. The hatch groaned and opened with a hiss of escaping air. Cold wind rushed in, even colder than before. Hana wanted to look, wanted to see what was happening, but her body would not obey her anymore. She heard breathing, not her own raspy, shallow breathing, but something else. Something strong and steady. A shadow fell across her, blocking the starlight from the open hatch. Then she felt something warm touch her shoulder and the universe stopped making sense. Nothing should be warm on this frozen moon. Nothing could be warm. But this touch radiated heat like a small sun, burning through the cold fog in her mind. A voice spoke, rough and alien, in a language her fading translator could not identify. But the tone was clear enough. Concern, urgency. Help was here, impossible as that seemed. Hana's last conscious thought before the darkness took her was simple and confused. What could possibly survive in this cold? Doyen had been scavenging the old mining facility when he heard the crash. The sound echoed across the frozen landscape like thunder, sharp and violent against the usual silence. He turned from the pile of spare parts he was sorting and looked toward the eastern ridge. A pillar of smoke rose against the starlit sky, already freezing into ice crystals. Another crash. Another ship torn apart by the treacherous space around this cursed moon. He grabbed his emergency pack and started running. His breath formed white clouds that froze instantly in the -40-degree air. The thermal suit he wore was patched and worn, barely holding together after 3 weeks of survival. But it was enough to keep him alive, and right now that was all that mattered. The trek across the ice took 20 minutes. His legs burned with effort, his lungs ached from the cold air, but Doyen kept moving. Someone might be alive in that wreckage. Someone might need help. When he reached the crash site, he found a small escape pod half buried in the ice. It was a design he did not recognize, sleek and strange. The metal was already coated with frost. Through the cracked view screen, he could barely see a shape inside. Doyen pulled the emergency release on the hatch. It resisted at first, frozen solid, but he put his full weight into it. The hatch groaned and opened. Cold air rushed out, so cold it made his eyes water. Inside the pod, he found her. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with skin that looked like frosted glass. Her body was covered in cracks, dark lines spreading across her arms and face like broken ice. She was not moving. Her eyes were closed. Doyen did not even know if she was breathing, but he knew hypothermia when he saw it. He had seen it before in his early days working on ice stations. The body shutting down, trying to preserve the core, sacrificing the extremities. Every species did it differently, but the signs were universal. He checked for a pulse and found it on her neck. 3 separate beats in a strange rhythm. 3 hearts, he realized. This species had 3 hearts, and all of them were beating too slow. Doyen did not hesitate. He pulled off his outer thermal jacket and wrapped it around her. She was so cold that ice crystals formed on the fabric immediately. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how light she was. Her body felt like holding frozen glass, delicate and brittle. The walk back to his shelter took twice as long. She was light, but the cold was draining his strength. Without his jacket, the freezing air bit into him through his inner layers. His hands started going numb. His face felt like stone, but he kept walking. 1 foot in front of the other. His shelter was in the old mining facility, in a small room he had managed to seal and heat using salvaged equipment from his crashed ship. It was not much, but it was warm. It would have to be enough. When he finally reached the facility, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely open the door. He carried her inside and laid her on his makeshift bed, a pile of thermal blankets near the heating unit. She was still not moving. The cracks in her skin had spread further. Doyen knew he was running out of time. He activated every heating unit he had salvaged, pushing them to maximum. The room temperature climbed slowly, too slowly. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned. Still not enough. Her skin was still too cold, still too dark at the edges. There was only one thing left to try. Doyen climbed onto the bed and pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her small frame. Human body temperature was high, he knew that. Humans ran hot compared to most species in the galaxy. It was one of the things that made them unusual. Maybe it would be enough. Her body was so cold against his chest that it hurt. It felt like holding ice directly against his skin. But slowly, very slowly, he felt her temperature starting to rise. The crystals on her skin began to melt. The dark edges started to lighten. He held her for hours, shivering despite the heating units. His own body temperature dropped as he shared his warmth with her. But he did not let go. If he let go, she would die. It was that simple. Finally, after what felt like forever, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, 3 eyelids pulling back to reveal eyes that were like looking into clear water. She stared at him without comprehension, then suddenly tried to pull away. Doyen released her immediately and moved back, giving her space. She scrambled to the far corner of the bed, pressing herself against the wall. Her mouth opened and she made sounds he could not understand, harsh and clicking. He raised his hands slowly, trying to look non-threatening. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she could not understand his words but hoping she would understand his tone. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She stared at him, her crystalline skin flickering with colors he had never seen before. Fear, probably. He would be frightened too, waking up in a strange place with an alien creature. Doyen pointed at himself. "Doyen," he said clearly. Then he pointed at her with a questioning gesture. She watched him for a long moment. Then a device on her belt chirped and spoke in broken standard. "Name, query, identification?" A translator. Thank the stars she had a translator. Doyen pointed at himself again. "Doyen, human." Then he pointed at her and waited. She touched the device on her belt. After a moment it spoke. "Hana Vithani." Her voice came through the translator in a neutral tone, but he could see the confusion and fear in her eyes. He slowly reached into his supply pack and pulled out a ration bar. It was one of his last ones, but she needed it more than he did. He held it out to her. She stared at the food but did not take it. Her translator spoke. "Cannot consume wrong biology." Doyen put the ration bar aside. Of course, different biology meant different food requirements. He would have to figure something else out. Hana spoke again, longer this time. The translator struggled with the words. "You saved." "This one. Temperature, crisis, you. Provided. Heat solution. Why?" Doyen sat back on his heels and thought about how to answer. Why had he saved her? Because she was dying. Because he could help. Because letting someone die when you could save them was unthinkable. Because you needed help, he said simply. The translator chirped as it processed his words. Hana stared at him with those water-clear eyes, and he could see she did not understand. Not really. The words had translated, but the meaning had not. She looked around the small room, at the heating units, at the blankets that covered her, at his worn thermal suit that he had given up to wrap around her. Her translator spoke again. "You endangered yourself for a stranger. This is not logical." Doyen smiled despite himself. "No," he agreed. "It's not logical. It's just right." Hana tilted her head, a gesture that seemed universal for confusion. She pulled his jacket tighter around herself, and for the first time since waking up, she seemed to relax slightly. Outside the facility, the frozen moon continued its orbit around the distant sun. The temperature was dropping as night approached, reaching -50 degrees. But inside the small heated room, a human and a Vithani sat in the warmth, separated by language and biology and culture, but connected by the simple fact that one had refused to let the other die alone. It was a small moment in a vast universe. But sometimes small moments changed everything. The first 3 days were difficult. Hana kept her distance, watching Doyen with those clear eyes that revealed nothing. She would accept the warmth from his heating units, but refused to come close to him again. At night, when the temperature dropped dangerously low, she would wrap herself in every blanket he owned and still shiver against the wall. Doyen did not push. He understood fear. He understood the strangeness of waking up dependent on an alien species you had never met before. So he gave her space and focused on their survival. On the fourth day, Hana's translator had charged enough to work properly. She approached him while he was sorting through salvaged electronics trying to repair his long-range transmitter. "Your vessel," her translator spoke in that neutral voice. "Also destroyed?" Doyen looked up from his work. "Yes, solar storm hit us 3 weeks ago. The radiation fried our shields. We crashed on the dark side of the moon." He paused, old grief tightening in his chest. "I was the only survivor." Hana's skin flickered with a pale blue color. "I express regret, sympathy. The translation is imperfect." "I understand," Doyen said quietly. "Thank you." She moved closer, looking at the transmitter components spread across his work surface. "You attempt to signal for rescue?" "Yes, but the transmitter was damaged in the crash. I've been trying to repair it, but I'm missing some key parts." He gestured at the broken pieces. "My distress beacon works, but it only reaches about 2 light years. There's nothing that close." Hana's 3-fingered hand reached out and touched one of the components. "My emergency pod also contains communication equipment. Perhaps we can combine our technology?" It was the first time she had suggested working together. Doyen felt something loosen in his chest. "That would help." "Yes, thank you." They walked to her crashed pod together, their first trip outside the facility as a team. Doyen showed her how to use the thermal suit he had pieced together from spare parts. It was too large for her small frame, but it worked. She moved awkwardly in the bulky suit, unused to such primitive equipment. The pod was half buried in ice now, frosted over and dark, but the emergency systems were still functional. Hana accessed the communication array and removed several components with practiced efficiency. Doyen watched her work, impressed by her precision. "You are engineer?" she asked as they walked back, her arms full of salvaged tech. "I was a maintenance specialist on merchant vessels," Doyen explained. "Not a real engineer, but I know my way around ship systems." "What about you?" "Research scientist. Mineral composition and geological surveys. I study rocks and ice formations." Her translator paused. "Not relevant skills for survival situations." Doyen smiled. "Everyone has skills. You're good with electronics. That's relevant." Back in the shelter, they worked side by side for hours. Hana's fingers were more precise than his, able to handle the delicate connections. Doyen's experience with makeshift repairs helped them adapt incompatible systems. Slowly, piece by piece, they built something that might work. As they worked, they talked. Hana asked about Earth, about human culture. Doyen tried to explain concepts that did not translate well. Family that was chosen, not just biological. Art created for emotion rather than function. Decisions made with the heart instead of pure logic. "Your species is difficult to understand," Hana admitted, her skin flickering with that pale blue color again. Doyen was learning to recognize it as confusion or uncertainty. "We're difficult for ourselves to understand sometimes," he said with a laugh. "We're contradictory. We do things that don't make logical sense, but somehow it works for us. Like saving a dying stranger," Hana said quietly. "Using your own warmth, risking your survival. No logical reason." Doyen set down the tool he was holding and looked at her. "There was a reason. You needed help. That's enough reason. But you gained nothing. The logical action would be to conserve your resources, your thermal gear, your energy, increasing your own survival probability. Is that what your people would do?" Hana's skin turned a darker shade. "Yes, the Vithani value efficiency above all things. We calculate probability. We make optimal choices. Emotional decisions are considered weak, primitive." The word stung more than Doyen expected. He had heard it before. Humans were often called primitive by other species. Too emotional, too chaotic, too unpredictable. It was one reason why human expansion in the galaxy was restricted. Other species feared what they could not calculate. "Maybe primitive isn't always bad," Doyen said carefully. "Maybe sometimes feelings know things that logic doesn't." Hana did not respond to that. They worked in silence for a while. The only sounds the hum of heating units and the click of tools against metal. That night, a storm hit. The wind howled outside the facility, driving the temperature down to -60 degrees. Even with all the heating units running at maximum, the room grew cold. Frost formed on the inside of the walls. Doyen watched Hana huddle in her corner, wrapped in blankets, her skin growing darker at the edges again. He could see her shivering, her 3 hearts beating faster as her body fought to stay warm. One of the heating units sparked and died. The room temperature dropped another 5 degrees. "Hana, Doyen called softly. You need to come here, near the remaining heating units. You're too far away. I am adequate, her translator responded, but he could hear the strain even through the mechanical voice. You're not adequate. You're freezing. He stood and walked to her corner. Please, stop being stubborn and accept help. She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw real emotion in those clear eyes, not just confusion or fear, but something deeper. Shame, maybe, or pride being swallowed. Your people already think mine are weak, she said through the translator. I should not require such assistance. I don't think you're weak, Doyun said firmly. I think you're strong. You survived a crash that killed your whole crew. You're alive right now because you're tough. Accepting help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. Hana stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she unwrapped herself from the blankets and moved closer to the heating units. Closer to him. They sat side by side through the night, sharing the warmth from the single remaining heating unit. Doyun could feel her shivering against his shoulder. Without thinking, he put his arm around her, pulling her closer. She stiffened at first, then gradually relaxed. You are very warm, her translator said softly. Your species maintains such high body temperature. It must require significant energy. Yeah, we eat a lot, Doyun agreed. Our metabolism runs fast. It's one of our evolutionary advantages. We can survive in a wider range of temperatures than most species. And you share this advantage freely, with strangers, with those who cannot repay you. That's what makes us human, Doyen said. We're a social species. We help each other. We help anyone who needs it if we can. Hana was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke again, and this time her voice came through the translator with something that sounded almost like wonder. I am beginning to understand why the Galactic Council fears your species. Not because you are primitive, but because you are dangerously different. The storm raged outside. The heating unit hummed its steady rhythm, and in the small circle of warmth, a human and a Vithani sat together, building something that went beyond survival, building understanding piece by careful piece. By morning, the storm had passed. The second heating unit was beyond repair, but they had survived. And when Hana moved to her corner of the room, she did not go as far away as before. Progress, Doyen thought, small but real. On the 10th day, Hana noticed that Doyen was moving more slowly. His hands, usually steady and quick with repairs, fumbled with the tools. He kept flexing his fingers and wincing. You are damaged, she stated, watching him work on the transmitter. Just some frostbite, Doyen said, not looking up. It's not serious. I've had worse. Hana moved closer, reaching for his hands. He pulled back instinctively, but she fixed him with a sharp look that needed no translation. Reluctantly, he let her examine his fingers. The skin was discolored, patches of white and gray that meant dead tissue. His fingertips were the worst, cracked and painful. Hana's skin flickered through several colors as she studied the damage. Concern, then something that looked like guilt. This occurred when you gave me your thermal gear, she said. It was not a question. It's fine. They'll heal. They will not heal without treatment. Permanent damage is occurring. She released his hands and stood abruptly, walking to her salvaged equipment. She pulled out a small container that glowed with a soft blue light. My people use this for thermal damage. It may work on your biology. Hana, you should save that for yourself. You might need it. She ignored him, returning with the container. She opened it carefully, revealing a crystalline substance that looked like frozen honey. Place your hands here. Doyen hesitated, then did as she instructed. The substance was cold at first, painfully cold, but then it began to warm. The pain in his fingers faded, replaced by a strange tingling sensation. It encourages cellular repair, Hana explained. Our biology is different, but the basic principles may apply. Keep your hands in the solution for 30 minutes. As he sat there, hands submerged in the alien healing substance, Doyen watched Hana return to the transmitter work. She had learned his repair methods quickly, adapting them to her more precise style. They made a good team. Strange how well they fit together despite being from completely different worlds. Tell me about the Vithani, he said, breaking the comfortable silence. What is your world like? Hana's hands paused over the wiring. Efficient, she said after a moment. Everything is ordered. Everyone has a function. We eliminated chaos centuries ago. Our cities are perfectly temperature controlled. Our society runs on predictable schedules. We have reduced waste to almost nothing. Sounds perfect. It is perfect. But her skin flickered with that uncertain pale blue. Or it should be. But sometimes I wonder if we eliminated too much. Not just chaos, but also variation, spontaneity, individual choice. Is that why you became a researcher? To find variation? Perhaps. Hana connected two wires with delicate precision. I wanted to see things that were not controlled. Natural formations, random patterns in ice. Evidence that the universe does not always follow perfect order. She paused. My family thought it was a waste. My colleagues said I should focus on practical applications, but I needed to know that disorder could create beauty too. Doyen smiled. You're more human than you think. That is not a compliment in my society. It is in mine. They worked through the day, combining their knowledge and skills. The transmitter was slowly taking shape, becoming something that might actually reach beyond this frozen moon. But there were still missing components, still problems to solve. That evening, while Doyen prepared his meager ration for dinner, Hana accessed the data files from her pod. She had been avoiding them, he realized. Afraid of what she might find about her lost crew, about the scope of the disaster that brought her here. He watched her face as she read, saw her skin cycle through colors he had not seen before. Shock, he guessed. Or horror, what is it? He asked gently. Hana looked up, her clear eyes wider than usual. I found something. About your species. About humans. She turned her tablet so he could see. This is from the Galactic Council database. Classification files. Doyen moved closer, reading the text. It was in Standard, translated from dozens of languages. The file was labeled Species Assessment Homo sapiens. Class 4 adaptables, he read aloud. Extreme environmental tolerance. Rapid cultural evolution. High social bonding across genetic groups. Tendency toward pack behavior even with non-related individuals. He looked at Hana. I've never seen this before. These files are usually restricted. Keep reading, she said quietly. He scrolled down. Emotional range exceeds most known species. Decision-making heavily influenced by empathy and social factors. Demonstrates self-sacrifice behavior at rates unprecedented in galactic survey. Extremely difficult to predict using standard behavioral models. The next section made him stop. Danger assessment, high. Humans demonstrate aggressive expansion patterns but also unprecedented cooperation with other species. They form emotional bonds rapidly and intensely, often prioritizing these bonds over logical self-interest. This emotional contagion can destabilize established social orders. Recommendation: limit human integration with other species until cultural impact can be better predicted. Doyen felt something cold settle in his stomach. They're afraid of us. Not because we're violent, because we're too friendly. Because you change things, Hana said. You make other species question their own cultures. The report includes several case studies. A human merchant who convinced an entire Vithani colony to establish individual art programs. A human medic who started a social revolution on a planet where emotional expression was forbidden. A human engineer who taught a warrior species about conflict resolution. Those sound like good things. They are disruptive things. They create chaos in ordered systems. Hana's skin flickered rapidly through colors. The Council fears that human influence could destabilize civilizations that have existed for thousands of years. So they restrict us. Keep us contained. Make sure we don't spread our dangerous ideas about compassion and friendship. Doyen heard the bitterness in his own voice. Now I understand, Hana said softly. Why you saved me. It is not an anomaly. It is what your species does. You see someone in need and you cannot help yourself. You must try to save them, even at cost to yourself, even when it makes no logical sense. Is that such a terrible thing? It is a powerful thing, perhaps too powerful for the galaxy to accept. She looked down at her hands. My people teach that emotions are weakness. That logic is the only path to true civilization, but you have shown me that logic without compassion is cold, empty. Perhaps that is why your species frightens others. You prove that there is another way to be advanced. Doyen pulled his hands from the healing solution. The frostbite was already looking better, the color returning to normal. Thank you, he said, for using your medicine on me, for sharing your supplies. It is logical, Hana replied, but her skin was flickering again. You are necessary for my survival. Therefore, maintaining your health increases my own survival probability. Is that the only reason? She was quiet for a long moment, then almost too softly for the translator to pick up. No, that is not the only reason. Outside, the frozen moon continued its lonely orbit. Inside the small heated room, two beings from different worlds, different biologies, different philosophies, worked together on a transmitter that might save them both. They did not speak much for the rest of the evening, but the silence was comfortable now. Understanding had taken root, growing in the space between them like something fragile but real. And deep in her tablet's memory, the file remained open, displaying humanity's classification. Dangerous not because they destroy, but because they connect. Because they refuse to let others suffer alone. Because they insist, despite all logic and reason, that every individual life has worth. It was the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever encountered. And Hana was beginning to think it was also the most beautiful. On the 15th day, they finished the transmitter. Doyen connected the final wire while Hana calibrated the power output. They had combined human improvisation with Vithani precision, creating something neither species would have built alone. It was ugly and awkward, held together with salvaged parts and desperate hope. But when Doyen activated it, the display glowed steady and green. "It works," he said, hardly believing it. "We actually did it." Hana's skin flashed bright yellow, a color he had learned meant excitement or joy. "Signal strength is good. We can reach approximately 4 light years. Begin broadcast?" "Yes. Send on all emergency frequencies." Hana entered the commands and the transmitter began broadcasting their distress call into the void. 2 voices, 2 species, 1 simple message. "We are here. We are alive. Please help." Now came the hardest part. Waiting. They sat together near the heating unit, watching the transmitter's display. Hours passed. The emergency rations were almost gone. The heating units were running on the last power cells. They had maybe 3 days left before the cold became too much, even for both of them together. "Tell me about Earth," Hana said suddenly. "If we survive, I would like to understand your world." Doyen thought about home. He had not let himself think about it much during the past weeks. Missing home made survival harder. But now, with rescue maybe coming, he let the memories return. "It's beautiful," he said. "Blue and green and white. We have oceans that cover most of the planet. Mountains that touch the sky. Deserts and forests and ice fields. So much variety. So many different places, different climates, different ways of living. And the people? 8 billion humans, all different. Different languages, different cultures, different beliefs. We fight sometimes. We disagree a lot. But we also help each other. When disaster hits one region, others send aid. When someone is in trouble, strangers become family." He smiled. "We're messy and complicated and emotional, but we're trying, always trying to be better." Hana's translator was quiet for a moment before she spoke. "I envy that. The Vithani eliminated most variation long ago. We have one language now, one culture, one way of thinking. It is efficient, but sometimes I wonder what we lost. What colors we erased to make everything uniform. You're not like other Vithani, are you?" "No, I am considered odd. Too curious. Too questioning. I was tolerated because my research produced results but never fully accepted." Her skin flickered pale blue. "Perhaps that is why I was willing to volunteer for deep space exploration. Out here, no one could judge me for being different." "Different is good," Doyen said firmly. "Different means you see things others miss. Different means you create new solutions. Like this transmitter. Exactly like this transmitter." They sat in comfortable silence. 2 different beings who had learned to understand each other beyond words. Doyen found himself thinking about what would happen when rescue came. They would be separated. Taken to different ships, different worlds. This strange friendship would end as suddenly as it began. The thought hurt more than he expected. The transmitter beeped. Both of them jumped to attention, hearts racing. A response so soon. Hana read the display. "Incoming signal. Vithani military vessel. They received our distress call. Estimated arrival time 12 hours. Relief flooded through Doyen. They were saved. 12 hours was cutting it close, but they would make it. Then the transmitter beeped again. "Second signal," Hana said, her skin flickering rapidly through colors. "Human merchant convoy. Also responding. Estimated arrival 18 hours. Both species were coming. Both were sending help." Doyen should have felt relieved, but instead he felt a strange tension. 12 hours. That was how much time they had left together. The Vithani ship will arrive first, Hana said quietly. I will be removed from this moon before the humans arrive. Yes, we will not see each other again. Doyen wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Once she was with her people, there would be debriefings and medical examinations and transport to her homeworld. Once he was rescued, there would be survivor processing and questioning and eventual assignment to a new ship. Their paths would diverge, leading to different parts of the galaxy. I'm glad I found you, he said finally. Even though this situation was terrible, I'm glad we met. Hana's skin turned a deep blue he had never seen before. I am also glad. You have changed my understanding of many things. About your species. About my own species. About what matters beyond logic and efficiency. They sat up through the night, neither wanting to sleep and waste the precious hours remaining. They talked about everything and nothing. Doyen told stories about his travels to different planets, the strange people he had met, the wonders he had seen. Hana described her research, the patterns she had discovered in ice formations, the beauty of crystal growth in vacuum. As the hours passed, the temperature dropped again. One of the remaining heating units flickered and failed. The room grew colder. Without discussing it, they moved closer together, sharing warmth as they had that first night. You will always be warm, Hana said softly, her head resting against his shoulder. Even in the coldest places, humans carry their own heat. Your bodies, your hearts. You radiate warmth into the universe. You're not so cold yourself anymore, Doyen replied. Maybe you just needed someone to show you that being warm isn't weakness. Perhaps. Her translator was barely whispering now. Doyen, if I never see you again, I want you to know something. You saved more than my life. You saved my understanding of what life can be. I will never forget that. I won't forget you either. First alien I ever saved from freezing. That's kind of memorable. She made a sound that the translator could not interpret, but Doyen thought it might be laughter. The last heating unit hummed steadily, fighting against the cold. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small drama playing out below. Two rescue ships moved through space, racing toward the same frozen moon for different reasons but with the same goal. As dawn approached, such as it was on this tidally locked moon, the temperature dropped to -70 degrees. Even with the heating unit, frost formed on the walls. Hana was shivering again, her skin turning dark at the edges. Doyen held her closer, sharing his warmth one last time. She did not protest. She wrapped her 3-fingered hands around his arm, holding on like he was the only warm thing in a frozen universe. Because for her, he was. Thank you, she whispered through the translator. For everything. For not letting me die alone. For treating me like I mattered. For showing me that your species is not primitive at all. You are evolved in ways mine has not begun to understand. You're going to make me cry, Doyen said, his voice rough. Crying is emotional release. Your species uses it for healing. There is no shame in it. You've learned a lot about humans. I had a good teacher. They sat together as the hours ticked away. Two beings from different worlds who had found connection in the most unlikely place. The transmitter counted down the time until rescue, each number bringing relief and loss in equal measure. When the display finally showed 1 hour remaining, they separated reluctantly. There were preparations to make, equipment to pack, evidence to preserve of their survival, but every few minutes, their eyes would meet across the small room, and something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, understanding that transcended language and biology, and something else. Something neither of them had words for, in any language. The transmitter beeped its final alert. The Vithani military ship was entering orbit. Transport would begin shortly. Their time was up. The Vithani military transport beam lit up the facility with cold blue light. Hana watched it materialize, her skin cycling through colors too quickly for Doyen to identify. Fear, anticipation, relief, regret. All of it mixed together. 3 Vithani materialized in the room. They wore military uniforms, sharp and precise, with rank markings that Hana understood immediately. The leader was a female, taller than Hana, with skin that held none of Hana's color variations. She was perfectly controlled, perfectly calm. Dr. Hana, the leader said in their language. Hana's translator picked it up for Doyen's benefit. I am Commander Bora. We received your distress signal. Prepare for immediate extraction and medical evaluation. Commander, Hana responded, her voice steady. I must express gratitude, but I also must inform you that my survival was due to the assistance of this human. Doyen saved my life. Without his intervention, I would have perished. Commander Bora's gaze shifted to Doyen. Her skin showed no color change at all, completely neutral. The human will be retrieved by his own species. Their vessel is 6 hours behind us. He is not our concern. He should be our concern, Hana said. And Doyen heard something new in her voice. Strength. Certainty. He used his own resources to preserve my life. He shared his warmth, his equipment, his knowledge. By Vithani law, a life debt is owed. There is no life debt between species, Commander Bora said coldly, particularly not with humans. Their assistance, if it occurred, was coincidental. They are known to be opportunistic. This human likely caused both vessel failures to create a situation he could exploit. Doyen felt the accusation like a physical blow. He had not expected gratitude, but he had not expected this either. To be accused of causing the disasters that had stranded them both. That is not true, Hana said sharply. Solar storms caused both crashes. The evidence is clear. Doyen risked his own survival to preserve mine.
He gave me his thermal gear when he had barely enough for himself.
He shared the only heating equipment he had salvaged. He held me through the night to keep me from freezing. These are not the actions of an opportunist. Commander Bora's expression did not change. Doctor, you have clearly been affected by your ordeal. Extended exposure to human emotional manipulation is known to cause confusion. We must remove you immediately for decontamination and psychological evaluation. I do not require decontamination. I require you to acknowledge the truth. The truth is that humans are Class 4 dangers. They destabilize. They manipulate. They spread their chaotic emotional patterns to other species. Commander Bora gestured to her security officers. Prepare the doctor for transport. No. Hana stepped back, positioning herself between the officers and Doyen. I will not board your vessel until Doyen receives acknowledgement and compensation for his assistance. The room went very still. Doyen could see the shock on Commander Bora's face, the first emotion she had shown. A Vithani refusing orders, a scientist defying military authority. It was clearly unprecedented. Dr. Hana, you are not thinking clearly. The human has infected you with his emotional dysfunction. This is exactly why contact with their species is restricted. The only thing Doyen has done is show me that logic without compassion is incomplete, that efficiency without empathy is cold, that perhaps my people have eliminated something essential in our pursuit of perfection. Before Commander Bora could respond, the room filled with another transport beam, this one warmer, more golden. 4 humans materialized, all wearing merchant fleet uniforms. The lead human was older, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of long years in space. Captain Tai Yang of the human merchant vessel Bright Star, he announced, looking around the room with sharp eyes. We're here for Doyen. His gaze found Doyen and his weathered face broke into a smile. Damn good to see you alive, kid. Captain, Doyen said, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. He had served under Captain Tai Yang before his transfer. Seeing a familiar face felt like coming home. Captain Tai Yang turned to Commander Bora and gave a respectful nod. Commander, thank you for responding to the distress call. We appreciate the Vithani military's assistance. The human is yours to retrieve, Commander Bora said stiffly. We are extracting our scientist. This situation is concluded. Not quite concluded, Captain Tai Yang said mildly. I'd like to hear what happened here. How both of you survived in these conditions. That's quite an achievement. The human performed basic survival assistance, Commander Bora said. Nothing extraordinary. We have extracted the relevant data and will compensate for materials used. That's not true, Hana said loudly. Doyen saved my life. He gave me his warmth when I was freezing. He shared everything he had. He treated me with respect and kindness. He showed me that humans are not the dangerous primitives your reports claim. Captain Taeyang's eyebrows rose. He looked at Doyen with new appreciation. That sounds like Doyen, he's good people. He turned back to Commander. Bora, seems like there's more to this story than basic survival, assistance. The human did what any sentient being would do in similar circumstances. We owe primitives nothing for instinctive behavior. Primitives. Captain Taeyang's voice went quiet, and Doyen recognized the tone. The captain was angry, though he hid it well. "Commander, we may not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but we're not primitives. And from what I'm hearing, my crew member went above and beyond to help your scientist. That deserves acknowledgement at minimum. Humans are classified as Class 4 dangers due to your emotional volatility and destabilizing influence. Any interaction is carefully controlled to prevent contamination of established cultures." "Contamination," Captain Taiyang repeated. "That's what you call compassion? Helping someone in need? That's contamination? It is chaos. It is inefficiency. It is everything the Vithani evolved beyond centuries ago." Hana's skin flashed bright red, a color Doyen had never seen before. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We did not evolve beyond it. We eliminated it. We cut away the parts of ourselves that made us messy and complicated and sometimes irrational. We called it progress. But standing here, seeing how you dismissed genuine kindness as manipulation, I wonder if we actually devolved. Dr. Hana, you are relieved of duty pending psychological evaluation. Your judgment is clearly compromised. My judgment is finally clear." Hana turned to Doyen, and her eyes were bright in a way that transcended species differences. "You showed me something I will never forget. That warmth matters. That individuals matter. That sometimes the illogical choice is the right choice. Thank you, Doyen, for everything." "Hana," he started but did not know how to finish. What could he say? That these 2 weeks had changed him too? That he would remember her forever? That he wished things could be different? She reached into her pack and pulled out a piece of his torn thermal blanket, the one he had wrapped around her that first night. "I kept this. Evidence of human warmth. I will carry it always." Then the Vithani security officers took her arms, firmly but not roughly, and guided her toward the transport beam. She did not resist, but she kept her eyes on Doyen until the last moment. "Wait," Doyen called out. "Hana, if you ever need anything, if you ever want to talk, find me, okay? Find me." "I will try," her translator said, and then she was gone, dissolved into blue light and transported to the military vessel above. Commander Bora gave Captain Taiyang a curt nod. "The situation is resolved. We recommend you maintain distance from Vithani space. Your species' presence is disruptive." She and her remaining officers disappeared in another flash of blue light. The room suddenly felt very empty. Captain Taiyang put a hand on Doyen's shoulder. "You okay, kid?" "I don't know," Doyen said honestly. "We survived together. We built something together. And now she's gone and her people think I was manipulating her." "That's politics," one of the other crew members said. "The Council is afraid of us. Always has been. They can't control how we make other species feel, and that scares them." "Doesn't make it right," Doyen said. "No," Captain Taiyang agreed. "It doesn't, but what you did here, saving that scientist, treating her with respect and kindness, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us worth something in this galaxy, no matter what the Council says." He squeezed Doyen's shoulder. "Come on, let's get you home. You need food and rest and a medical check." As they prepared for transport, Doyen took one last look at the small room that had been his prison and his sanctuary. The heating units were cold now, their power exhausted. The makeshift transmitter sat silent, its job complete. The blankets were scattered across the floor, but he could still feel Hana's presence, could still hear her voice asking why he saved her, could still remember the moment she finally understood that sometimes there is no why. Sometimes you just help because it's right. The transport beam took him warm and golden and familiar. As the frozen moon disappeared below, Doyen touched his pocket where he had placed a small crystal shard that had fallen from Hana's skin during her recovery. A piece of her just as she carried a piece of him. They were separated now, pulled back to their own people and their own worlds. But something had changed. Something important had passed between them on that frozen moon. And Doyen had a feeling that this was not the end of their story. It was just the beginning. 6 months passed like water through fingers. Hana stood before the Vithani Science Council, her research tablet gripped in her 3-fingered hands. The council chamber was perfectly temperature-controlled, perfectly lit, perfectly organized. Everything about it spoke of efficiency and order. It made her feel cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. "Dr. Hana," the lead counselor said, his skin showing no color variation at all, "you have requested this hearing to present controversial research. Explain." Hana activated her tablet, and the data appeared on the chamber's display screens: charts, graphs, thermal readings, video footage from her survival pod's emergency recorder, and at the center of it all, images of Doyun. I present research on human behavioral patterns, specifically regarding altruistic behavior in survival situations. My findings contradict current galactic assessments of human species motivations. This research was not approved by the Ethics Committee. The research occurred during my survival on Theta 7. I could not request approval while dying of hypothermia. A ripple of color passed through the assembled council. Members. Discomfort, disapproval. Hana pressed forward. Current. Galactic classification lists humans as class 4 dangers due to emotional volatility and destabilizing influence. My research demonstrates that this classification is based on incomplete understanding. Humans do not help others to manipulate. They help because they cannot do otherwise. It is fundamental to their nature. She presented her data. The thermal readings showing how Doyen had shared his warmth at cost to himself. The inventory showing how he had given her his supplies. The timeline showing how he had worked for weeks on a transmitter to save them both, not just himself. This human, Doyen, had every logical reason to conserve his resources for himself alone. Sharing with me reduced his survival probability by 37%, yet he shared without hesitation, without expectation of reward. This is not manipulation. This is something our models cannot predict because we have eliminated it from our own species. You speak of emotion, one counselor said with distaste. Emotion is inefficient. It clouds judgment. We evolved beyond it. Did we evolve beyond it? Or did we cut it out of ourselves like a diseased organ? Hana's skin flashed through colors rapidly, no longer caring about the breach of protocol. I nearly died on that moon. I accepted death because I calculated the probability of rescue as negligible. Logic told me to give up. But Doyen did not give up. He refused to accept my death even though saving me was illogical. That refusal, that emotion, that human warmth kept me alive. She pulled out the piece of thermal blanket she had carried every day since her rescue. This is evidence. Physical proof that humans give their warmth freely. It is not a weapon. It is not manipulation. It is simply who they are. Dr. Hana, you are clearly compromised by your experience. We recommend immediate reassignment and continued psychological evaluation. I am not compromised. I am enlightened. She stood straighter, her skin turning bright yellow with defiance. I request permission to publish this research. Other species deserve to know the truth about humans, not the fear-based classifications. The truth, permission denied. This research threatens galactic stability. The session is concluded, but as Hana left the chamber, she noticed something. Several younger scientists were watching her with colors flickering across their skin. Interest, curiosity, support. Even if they could not voice it publicly. Change had begun. Even if the council refused to see it. Far across the galaxy, Doyen stood in a very different kind of chamber. The Galactic Council hearing room was vast and cold, filled with representatives from dozens of species. He was nervous, surrounded by beings who saw humans as dangerous, but Captain Taeyang stood beside him, solid and reassuring. Human Representative Doyun, the council speaker said, their translation perfect but emotionless. You have been called to testify regarding human expansion into restricted zones. The council must determine if humanity poses a threat to galactic stability. Doyen stepped forward. His hands still bore scars from the frostbite, marks of the cold moon that would never fully fade. He held them up for the council to see. 6 months ago, I crashed on a frozen moon, he said clearly. I was alone. My crew was dead. I had barely enough supplies to survive. Then I found another crash survivor, a Vithani scientist named Hana. She was dying from cold. I had every reason to save my resources for myself. But I couldn't let her die. So I shared everything I had, my warmth, my equipment, my time, my hope. He looked around at the assembled representatives. Some leaned forward with interest. Others sat back with clear suspicion. You call us Class 4 dangers because we're emotional, because we can't be predicted by your models, because we form bonds too quickly and care too deeply. You're right about all of that. We do feel deeply. We do bond quickly. But that's not a weakness. That's our strength. It's what makes us human. Your emotional nature destabilizes cultures, a council member stated. You make other species question their own ways. You spread discontent. We spread hope, Doyen corrected. We spread the idea that every individual matters, that compassion is not weakness, that sometimes the illogical choice is the right choice. If that destabilizes your cultures, maybe your cultures need to be destabilized. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates showed approval. Others showed outrage. Captain Taeyang put a warning hand on Doyen's shoulder, but Doyen was not finished. I have scars from saving Hana's life, he continued, holding up his hands again. These marks are permanent. They'll remind me forever of that frozen moon, but I would do it again without hesitation. That's what humans do. We help, we care. We refuse to let others suffer if we can prevent it. And if the galaxy can't accept that, then the problem isn't with humanity. The problem is with the galaxy. He sat down, heart pounding. He had probably just made things worse for human-alien relations. But he had also told the truth. That had to count for something. The council debated for hours. Doyen and Captain Taeyang waited in an observation room, watching the proceedings on a screen. The votes were close. So many species feared human influence. So many wanted humanity kept isolated and controlled. Then something unexpected happened. A Vithani delegate requested permission to speak. It was unusual. The Vithani rarely participated in council debates, preferring to observe and vote based on logic alone. The delegate was a young female named Jiwoo. She approached the speaking platform with her skin flickering through multiple colors, clearly nervous but determined. I wish to present new research, she announced. Research conducted by Dr. Hana of the Vithani Science Institute. Her findings contradict current human classifications. I believe the council should review this data before voting. She presented Hana's research. Every data point, every measurement, every piece of evidence showing that human altruism was genuine, not manipulative. The thermal readings, the resource sharing, the video footage of Doyen working to save them both. Dr. Hana's conclusion is clear, Jiwoo said. Humans are not dangerous because they are primitive. They are remarkable because they have retained something most species eliminated during their evolution. Empathy. Genuine, selfless care for others. If we call this dangerous, we reveal more about our own limitations than theirs. The chamber fell silent. Doyen watched the screen, hardly breathing. Jiwoo was risking everything to present this research, just like Hana had risked everything to conduct it. The vote was called. One by one, the delegates registered their decisions. The results appeared on the display. Limited human-alien cooperation zones approved by a margin of 3 votes. It was not full acceptance. It was not open integration, but it was a start. It was the door opening, even if just a crack. Doyen felt tears on his face and did not bother to wipe them away. Somewhere out there on a distant Vithani world, Hana was probably watching this same broadcast. Probably crying too, if Vithani could cry. 2 weeks later, Doyen received his new assignment. Human Vithani Cultural Liaison, stationed at the newly established cooperation zone on the border between their territories. The posting came with a personal note from the human ambassador. Someone has to teach them that we're not so scary. Might as well be you. He accepted immediately. The cooperation zone was a new station, built specifically for this purpose. It was half human design, half Vithani, a compromise in metal and purpose. Doyen arrived on a transport ship, nervous and excited in equal measure. The station commander met him at the airlock. She was human, efficient, and professional. Welcome to Harmony Station, Liaison Doyen. Your Vithani counterpart arrived yesterday. She's in the Cultural Exchange Center. Doyen's heart stopped. She? Dr. Hana, I believe you two have met before. He ran. It was undignified. It was not proper protocol. But he ran through the station corridors until he reached the Cultural Exchange Center. And there she was. Hana stood by the window, looking out at the stars. She wore Vithani scientific robes, but her skin was bright with color, more vibrant than he remembered. When she heard him enter, she turned and her clear eyes found his across the room. For a moment, they just stared at each other. 6 months. 6 months of separation. 6 months of wondering if they would ever meet again,